Welcome to Season 5 of SEL in EDU. This is a space for educators who believe social-emotional learning isn't an add-on. It's part of how we teach, lead, and show up every day. I'm Dr. Krista, and in each episode, we'll explore real stories, practical strategies, and the human side of learning that helps schools grow with intention. Today, I am back with Thom Stecher, an educational consultant who has spent more than 40 years mentoring students and teachers, me being one of those. This is part 4 of our series, and we finally reach purpose. Thom shares the moment at his family table when his father put down his fork and said, "I want to make a difference." He calls that the takeoff to his North Star. Here's my conversation with Thom. Welcome back, SEL and EDU family. Hi, Thom. How are you today?
Hello, Krista. Hi, everyone.
This is something that in the very beginning we had talked about over a lunch. And over the last couple of weeks, we've had a chance to really dig into the 4 Ps. So in our first conversation, we explored perspective. In our second, we looked at possibility. And in the last episode, we talked about passion. So the next step in that progression, based on a keynote that you were giving, Thom, was purpose. And so as you think about the progression of these 4 Ps, what role does purpose play?
I always have thought about purpose as the North Star, as the guiding force in my life. Later on, we may talk more about this idea of the calling that resonates with us, that moves us forward. For me, purpose is also a discipline, and it's a discipline that fulfills the passion. See, simply having, I love passion. However, we can't end there. There has to be a larger force that guides us. There has to be a discipline that guides us. So I have my passion, but my purpose allows me to do the crafting, allows me to do everything I need to do to bring this out into the world.
So I'm thinking of like a channeling.
Good, very good.
Like your passion can take you in any direction, but your purpose helps you channel that energy
Right.
that you're feeling to move.
And it provides us nourishment, spiritual, soul nourishment. I know it does for me, because when my ego is driving something, it's usually uncomfortable and there's stress and anxiety involved. When I go back to my pure sense of purpose with perspective and possibilities and passion, then I find things much easier for me.
What is your purpose?
My purpose is to love and serve the world of education, including helping people understand that education is not a pouring in or a forcing in of information, but in fact is a drawing out. And actually the word comes from the Latin word educare, and it literally means to draw out. But one of the things I love most is simply framing a challenge or a dilemma and seeing how children respond to that. And the reason I still love to this day working with young adolescents is they're teaching me. They're bringing me information. They're bringing me aha moments. And of course, we know those aha moments fill our life, fill our soul.
This reminds me of conversations that you and I have always had. Is there an order to the SEL competencies? We often have talked that the more we know ourselves, the better we can connect with other people. And there have been instances where sometimes the more we learn from other people, our social awareness and our relationship skills actually help form our identity and shape how we show up.
I had this discussion. I do believe self-awareness comes first. However, or in addition, we can get there in many different avenues. And that goes back to the importance of the teacher, the guide, the counselor. That person helps us make those connections, helps us make those aha moments, helps us ideally help that younger adult or whomever it might be find their sense of purpose.
You mentioned earlier, correct me if I'm not phrasing this correctly, but like letting go of an ego.
Yeah.
Often we've talked about an identity before in other parts, and the role that that plays in our perspective, possibilities, passion, and purpose. And full disclosure, I think if you and I would have had this conversation a couple weeks ago, it would have maybe been a different conversation on my part. I am still in moments where I'm rethinking purpose from experiences. I think back to when I was a high school teacher and then became an instructional coach. And I remember talking to you as you helped me and guided me into professional learning. And I'm like, wow, I really like working with teachers. Like I didn't, but what does that mean about me as a teacher who loves working with kids? I started moving in a different direction and it felt like I was losing part of who I was and how I identified myself because my purpose was shifting. But you also brought up letting go of the ego piece. I'm just curious how you're thinking about purposes shifting through life.
I love that you are aware that our purpose can shift. I don't want any of our listeners to leave here today thinking, oh, I have my sense of purpose and it's locked in this little teeny tight box. No, we must keep our mind and our heart open for change, for opportunity. So I would ask folks, what's the core of that purpose? For me, you heard service and love. I imagine is somewhat similar for you as well. And I think that in itself is a lovely depth discussion. Here I am, a passionate, purposeful secondary educator. And then some old man comes in your life and that shifts a little tiny bit. And then here you are, your audience has gotten bigger. So that purpose is the core of the purpose is the same. You're still the same person I met how many years ago?
How has your North Star, and let me go back because I liked how it was love and service in education. It was broad, but very purposeful because you knew, like, you know what your lane is you want to be in.
Yeah.
You have the flexibility or the adaptability, the agility to move within there. What does that look like over your years in education?
Feel so blessed on how I came here, meaning in this world. I was born to a kindergarten teaching mother, and all those lessons that she would teach the 18 or 20s in her little kindergarten were in my life every day. And so as I grew older, the perspective taking began. I'm listening to her as I get a little bit older, I get a little more conscious. I'm listening to her tell all these stories, which are really learning opportunities about her kindergarten children. And then I had this incredible moment. My father was a maintenance foreman in a place called 3M in Bristol, Pennsylvania. I'm 16 years old. I'm a fairly bright kid, at least in the humanities. And he's quiet as can be. Usually at our dinner table, three children in the middle. It was tons of discussion between what happened in my dad's work. It was all people stuff, people interaction in the manufacturing world. And then my mom with the kindergarten. This one particular day, dad was totally quiet. My mom looked across the table. She said, "Is everything okay? You're so quiet today." And he paused. He put down his fork. He said, "No, I don't want to do this anymore." Now, I don't know what he's talking about. And then he looked across the table, pointed his finger at my mother and said, "I want to do what you do. I want to make a difference." Krista, I'll be 74 years old next month. I have never forgotten that in my life. That was like the rocket ship to my North Star. It was the beginning. It was the takeoff. And so I'm so glad I was conscious enough to get it. And then as I'm growing older, my sister is 6 years older than me. She's in college before me. She goes into education. My dad went back to school in his 50s, went back to school to get an education degree. And so that's an example of me beginning to find that North Star, but then that the changes that happen in our life. That was my beginning. And I explored a variety of different things, particularly in college. I explored the arts. Thought I wanted to be an artist. I explored psychology, which of course continues in my life. And I explored education and I had this incredible blessing of these teachers that were mentors. I'm probably one of the few people with an advanced education degree that never had a research course. That's probably to my disadvantage, but I've learned more about curriculum from you than I did at any of my professors in college. They were teaching me about human beings in this place called school. The same lesson my mom taught me about kindness and respect and caring. They were now teaching it through the lens of this newest research at that time called humanistic education and effective education, which now they were the forerunners of SEL.
Yes.
It's the same stuff.
Whatever you want, it will always be a foundation for learning and an accelerator of learning.
So those are some responses to your question. I think, again, it goes back to that. What is the essence of your purpose? Keep the mind and heart open for those movements in life, but continue to follow that North Star. It may have a different name. It may have a different structure. I think it's a calling. I often sense that this thing calls me forward, particularly when I'm off track.
Share more about that, please.
Yeah. So when I'm off track, it's clearly the ego trying to be in control. It's a negotiation. throughout our lives. Stress comes up quickly, fear comes up significantly. And if I can pause and when I calm down, that's when the calling, the spirit, the mission, the voice, that's when I hear better.
It's reminding me as I think about continuing, maybe it's not find a path, it's refine my purpose.
I like that.
Growing as I'm thinking out loud, like, where are things that I feel energized, where I feel I can get into a flow state and where I'm finding joy. And I've been working with somebody who is helping me think about the structure of my day to make the most of it. And thing she talks about is how you need a morning and an evening routine. She's like, "What do you do first thing in the morning?" I'm like, "Well, I turn off my alarm and I would check my social, check my email, like, what am I coming into my day?" And she's like, "Why are you why are you letting the world in before you even figured out how you're showing up?"
Wonderful.
Like, she's like, "Get right with yourself first."
Tremendous.
I've been thinking about this and how I'm refining habits to help me further refine my passions and my purpose, and thinking about that identity and having a more formed identity through perspective and possibility. And it's like a stretch. And you and I have talked about this stuff before.
Sure.
Stretched, and then you come back, you move towards. And so I think what I'm saying is that we talk a lot about purpose and sense of purpose and finding a purpose. And it's a lot.
And I want our listeners to reflect again on the word you used, refinement. Our life is a refining process. Even people like Sir Isaac Newton, they're trying to turn lead into gold. And so I am trying to turn my ego into spirit.
Oh, wow. I'm going to need to sit on that one for a while. Keep going, please.
Yes. A lot of the writing I do, which never comes to publication because I don't feel ready yet, is writing about the transcendent, writing about universal love, writing about divinity as I describe it, which makes sense to me. That's the place I love to be. That's the place that is always non-judgmental, full of love. So when your friend says, "How do you start your day?" I start my day by waking up, saying some quiet, reflective prayers. I get on the floor and do an hour of yoga, which is both a reflective and a literally stretching process, body and mind together. Then if I'm going to a school or to something outside of my office, I will repeat some mantras to myself, some affirmative mantras. If I'm not going out, I'm going to come down here on the floor and do my meditation work. And I don't really look at the world in terms of news. I actually never watch the news. I make like my favorite historian, Heather Cox Richardson, writes brilliant things. I'll read what she's writing that day. And I'm very picky now. That's about it for me in the news. There's nothing I can do about the Middle East. Nothing except pray, send goodwill, etc. However, I can put my entire energy into these students, these teachers, these administrators I'm working with that day. And those are the very conscious choices.
When you frame it that way, where are we putting our conscious energy and effort? That seems doable when we think about an SEL skill for our youth. We know it falls under self-awareness.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you need to have this big North Star for your entire life, but who and what and where are you serving? And we talked about, are you adding to the greater good?
Yes, you're right.
How do we help our young people find a sense of purpose, even in this classroom? Let's center and think about our purpose.
I think that is a really critical question that you're asking that I hope all of our educators are listening. One, we must be in relationship with our students. None of this stuff can happen. I cannot help to elevate them. I cannot help them find their passion, their North Star. I can't even do a very good job about possibilities and perspectives unless I am in relationship with them. And because you teach this, that must involve trust from both parties. So that's the early work and the work that never ends. We just build and build. Then once that happens within that process, I need to find, what do they love? What are they interested in? You and I have both met many brilliant children who are bored to tears because the work doesn't relate to them.
Just yesterday, working with a school district, a set of middle school staff around helping our students move from a growth mindset, their beliefs and their focus to actions. And how does that translate into learning so that they're not just shutting down or having that learned helplessness where they're going right to the teacher and saying, I can't do this, or I don't know what to do. And so, how do we give them the tools and language to help them move from thought process to skill set? And
But talk more about that for our listeners. It's important. And I've read your writing recently, helping our students move from mindset, that's all over the world, mindset, skill set. How are you helping teachers help their students do that?
yeah, so I kept hearing there was this disconnect. Try harder, do better. But what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
And so the last couple weeks, I've been up to my eyeballs in different research. And some of it is coming from research you introduced me to with Desi and Ryan.
Yep.
And what I ended up sharing with them is that if we want students to be motivated, we need three things. One, we need to set up conditions that are motivating. Look at the work we're asking them to do and the tasks, and does it fit? Do they have autonomy? Can they have choice and voice? Can they own the work? Do
Mm.
they have competence? Do they feel competent? Have we given them scaffolds and a clear roadmap? Ryan and Desi talk about relatedness. Is there the psychological safety where they can take risks? Dan Pink wrote Drive, and I think he takes relatedness and turns it into relevance. Do they see the meaning and the value? All this to say that if we're asking people to look at a purpose and pick a direction and get interested in something, do we, like you said, draw on their strengths, know who
Right.
are, make it relevant and meaningful? Do we give them the tools for the language to talk about what's happening in their brain as they're learning something new or finding their purpose?
I hope our listeners really kind of zero in on what you're saying, because you're talking about all the ingredients of that teacher-student relationship. Every teacher, every student, every class. Those are the necessary ingredients. I don't say that to say this is overwhelming. It's not. Take the steps. Learn about each student's name. Learn how to pronounce the name. Learn some background. Share some about yourself.
You're reminding me of I was in a middle school once where the teacher was talking about world religions, which I loved learning about.
Yes, me too.
And the students were sitting at their desks, nothing on their desk, and they were talking about Hinduism. And one of the girls in the class practiced Hinduism. And I'm like, dude, ask her to share. He stood up there and told the rest of the class about her religion.
Oh my God.
And I wouldn't put the student on the spot, but like, what could you share? And how could we learn from you? Because this is an integral part of your identity.
What just resonated with me as you spoke, the humility of leadership. The humility of Greater Good Science is writing a lot about that right now. Of course, I don't have all the answers. If I'm thinking, okay, I've taught for X number of years and I know this, that's your ego. Come on, humble yourself a little bit.
There was such a missed opportunity. And
Mm.
so, people who are listening, if you're wondering, how do we find our purpose and continually refine and navigate that while supporting our youth in finding and refining their purpose?
So humility is part of the refinement process. Now, two examples. One, that teacher, as you just said, lost an opportunity with a little bit of humility, could have connected with that young lady, could have empowered that young lady while simultaneously opening up the perspective of that entire classroom. Tremendous lost opportunity. And when I am not connected to my humility, that's my ego out of control, and the world will humble us. The world's very good at that. I can't predict when, but it will happen.
When I think about where we're at in education, it's a slow moving profession.
Yeah.
Pain,
Yeah.
but I'm always inspired by those educators who have the passion and the purpose to elevate student voice, like in the work that you do, which I want to come to, because that helps. That leadership conference that you offer in the summer allows students to find and refine
Yeah.
a purpose
Yeah.
when they go back to the school or connecting with other people. And so it's how are we working on this ourselves while elevating are you? And it's like that in all SEL pieces, but it's a cycle. And again, I'm always impressed by people who are like, let me learn. I could be pretty good and comfortable. I was just talking to a principal before I got on with you who was talking about consistency is important, but we don't want to be complacent. And so how as
Yes.
teachers are we consistent but still learning and not complacent and
Ex-
nurture that in our students? Could you talk a little bit about conference? Because I don't think we've talked
Sure.
about that because this is a pathway for students.
So if you're listening and you're anywhere in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Ohio, every year, usually the third week in July, the charitable organization called the Masons have invited us to create a leadership conference. We're now in year 26. It's held at the Patton Youth Campus in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. It is a week-long residential conference. We usually average between 90 and 100 students, middle school age, usually 7th grade to 18 years old. They are placed in age-appropriate groups. They are facilitated by 3 adults. Usually somebody like Krista would lead a group, accompanied by a bright light educator who is volunteering to help bring some of this back to their school. And then we call them counselors in training or facilitators in training, usually a college student who's been through this work as a participant and really knows that this is their purpose and wants to give back. We bring them challenges. We bring them life skill challenges. The first challenge is developing that community, which is going to continue all week long, and developing a trust, developing various levels of trust with their small group, which becomes their family. They take all their meals together, and then developing trust with that large community, 100 participants, 30 staff, 130 human beings, kind of living together for a whole week. We look at challenging issues. We don't shy away from anything. Diversity, equity, inclusion, access. We lovingly hit it head on. All the SEL skills, self-awareness, social skill development, self-management, responsible decision-making. And we incorporate fun. We incorporate challenging physical, social, mental activities that have been called adventure education. We bring them into indoors in a classroom environment. We have kids outdoors. All of that gets culminated in a very trust-oriented high ropes experience come Thursday of the week. These kids all in their tie-dye shirts, what they made the day before, and climbing anywhere from 30 to 70 feet up in a tree, a platform. And the challenges are varied. Some of you have seen ropes courses, and they will never be the same human being again. And they know that. They know that they've conquered something, and we help them define that. Many of them that are at high school know that for the first time, like, I want to do this, whatever this is. We've had people leave there who've become special ed teachers, occupational therapists, physical therapists, psychologists. We've had people, almost every profession you can imagine, law enforcement officers. And then the last day, they craft for themselves or for their school a action plan. This is how we're going to go back and make a difference with our school. This is how we're going to present this to our principal or superintendent. Now we're at a place that because of the work of the brilliant staff, these plans are so finely crafted. We have these students going back presenting professional development programs. We have them going back, kicking off the school year in keynote type things. We have them presenting to school boards. It's incredibly powerful. And if anybody, as you're connected to Krista, if you want information, she can help you get kids registered. If you want to volunteer, I can find a place for you. For many years, Krista was one of our core presenters and facilitators.
It reminds me of what we said earlier, where I was there to help facilitate learning for the youth, but I came back a changed person too, because I was learning and growing with them. So it's definitely a two-way process.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And there's no ego there.
No.
We all had a voice. We're sharing, we're growing with one another.
That's the beauty of this purposeful work. We all benefit, and that's what I love. The other thing I'll mention to the folks is our graduate programs, which Krista's also been involved in. When we created it 16 years ago now, it was the only master's degree in social emotional learning in the country. There are a few more now. But to be totally immersed in this work for 2 years, or some people finish a little earlier, there's so much joy. It's a wonderful experience.
And it's nice to know there's still a community of educators. Like if you're not finding that community in your school or in your grade level or in your team or your content, there are other people around. And sometimes it's just finding that connection. So if you're listening and you're like, I want to get involved, I want to know more about the Life Skills Conference or the master's program, the links will be there if you keep scrolling to the show notes. I know that there are some social media handles out there for the Life Skills Conference. So we'll put that all in there if you're interested. And I think this idea of finding our purpose and living toward that purpose. And I keep coming back to the refining because I think I need to keep that one in my head.
I love that concept.
Yeah. And then how we're supporting our youth in finding and refining their purpose. And I don't mean small as in insignificant. I mean small as in proximity, like within their community of friends or their family or their classroom, or whether it's the town or the state or the world.
Yeah. And we've had children come back from that conference days after, weeks after. They're all in different school districts, but they gather together now. They take that initiative to form that supportive environment. One concept that we haven't mentioned, I think is really important here. You introduced to me this idea of accountability buddy.
Yeah.
And as we're going through the refinement process, so important to have a trusted accountability buddy, somebody you can walk this path with. Very few of us can do it alone. So think of who that person is. And that also will be great work.
And you mentioned in one of the earlier podcasts about Brene Brown's 1 square inch.
Yes.
So if you remember that from an earlier podcast, listeners, go back and listen to it. I think it was in the possibilities and perspectives.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. But yes, leverage those people who can show up and listen and help be one of those guides for you.
I love the refinement idea. As we work, as we refine, those people will change. They'll come in and out of our life. But as we wrap up here about refinement, my grandfather, the farmer whose farm I grew up on, he used to walk me through the cornfields. Every once in a while, he'd stop and say, son, as long as you're breathing, there's work to do. As a kid, I thought he meant corn. He was way beyond that, but he meant something much larger than that. He meant the refinements of life. He meant the learning of life. And that's what brings me joy. Learning brings me joy.
And for me, it's these conversations. So Thank you for your willingness to go back and extend each of these. Throughout this series, we've explored how perspectives shapes what we see, possibility expands what we believe can happen. How passion moves us forward, and this helps us decide where that forward movement can go. Thank you to our listeners who have stayed with us on this 4-step journey and know that more will be coming. And we'd love to hear from you. How each of these parts has resonated with you personally and professionally. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Thank you for being part of the SEL in EDU family. As you move into the rest of your day, I invite you to notice one small way social emotional learning showed up in your thinking, your relationships, or your work. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep making space for meaningful, connected learning.